Alright guys, Shepherdess at Harmony Farms here, and I am moving to a new pasture today, which ends another full grazing cycle. I've made it around my 23 acres one more time. And so today I'm going to be talking about how I record my rotational grazing program. Alright guys, I'm getting ready to show you a very simple way to record your rotational grazing system, and I've created a free template for you guys to use as you record. I was on a live question and answers with Joel Salatin just a couple of months back, and his advice to beginner graziers was measure first, manage later. So in your first 1 to 2 years of grazing, measure and record like crazy so that down the road you will have the data you need to create intricate grazing plans. But I'm just going to get straight to it. I am a visual learner, so what I do is I simply take an outline of the pastures that I am grazing. I begin with that. To get a look at your property, you can use something like Google Maps. I also use the Distance app to get an outline and an actual shape of the pastures that I'm grazing. But those are two different tools that you can use to actually get somewhat of an aerial view to create your sketch for your grazing cycle sheet. Then in the upper left-hand corner, I put the year, the grazing cycle, beginning at number 1, the first day I launched onto pasture, and ending with number 4. I was able to make 4 grazing cycles in this 1 year across my 23 acres. I put the animals that were grazing it. I put a detailed list of all of the animals, rams, ewes, lambs, steers, up in that corner. On the left-hand side, I will also put a slot for any supplemental feed that I fed during this grazing cycle. I put a slot for the duration of the grazing cycle, and I put a slot in for the animal unit equivalent being managed within this grazing cycle. Animal unit being 1,000 pounds. I don't manage my system on an individual animal basis, even though I do save that very specific info. I go by animal units, and this allows me to graze multiple species in one paddock or in one cycle without the confusion of having to list lambs, rams, ewes, steers, etc. I can just go by that animal unit equivalent, which is 1,000 pounds worth of grazing animal. From there, I will put dates within each cross-fenced pasture, when we entered that pasture and when I exited that pasture. Now at this point in time, I'm not going so far as to put in each and every little paddock. I may in the future become that detailed, but those 2 critical dates are on this record keeping, and it is the date we entered the field and the date we exit the field. Another thing that I want to mention that I use on a daily basis, a simple notebook with an open calendar for day to day. And when I do things like shift paddocks or feed something special to address a certain situation, I will jot it down in one of these little square boxes so that as I am amending each grazing cycle, I can constantly refer back to the day to day and get the information that I need to make these grazing cycle sheets. So I will fill this out at the end of my grazing cycle, and I will use the day-to-day information in this simple little notebook to do that. So a lot of times people will ask me for information specific to my operation. I'm going to give it to you. I began rotational grazing August 15th, 2020. My first grazing cycle included 3.3 animal units on a rotation that was about 1 new paddock every 2 days. Each paddock was 1/10 of an acre, and 3.3 animal units represented 25 ewes and a ram. The ewes were dry and had not been bred yet, and so they were at their lowest nutritional requirement. And that cycle took me 120 days to get through all 23 acres. So it took 25 sheep about 120 days to graze through 23 acres. My fourth grazing cycle was May 24th through August 13th of 2021, and my animal units went from 3.3 to 8.5 within the space of 1 year. The grazing cycle took 82 days to complete with all of these animal units in tow. Paddock sizing was between 1 to 2 days per paddock. So you can kind of see there how the grazing cycle shrunk with the expansion of the animal units from 3.3, which was just the flock at that time, to 8.5. And the ewes were lactating and had really high nutritional requirements. But even so, it was really encouraging to see that the animal units almost tripled. But if you notice, the grazing cycle only shortened by 30%. That was partially because it was during a really fast growing season, but also I tightened up my paddock sizes and I moved more frequently. So having this information, it was really encouraging to see how little tweaks in management gave me more per grazing cycle. And it's going to be even more exciting to see into the future as I hone in on my management, as I tighten up my practices, how I can do more on this 23 acres through proper management.